Everybody be seated, please. Call your next witness, Ms. Copeland.
State calls Jeffrey LaCasse.
If you'd face the clerk and be sworn, please, sir. Raise your right hand.
Swear affirm testimony about giving this case to be truth and whole truth and nothing but truth, so help you God.
I do.
You may proceed.
Sir, please introduce yourself and spell your first and last name.
Yeah, I'm Jeffrey LaCasse, Jeffrey. Excuse me. Last name spelled LaCasse.
How are you employed, Mr. LaCasse?
I'm employed at Florida State University as an associate professor.
All right. What about back in 2014?
I was an assistant professor at Florida State University.
All right. And did you have a relationship with Wendy Adelson?
I did.
What type of relationship was that?
We started dating in the fall of 2013. She became my girlfriend around March of 2014.
Okay. And when did that relationship end?
July of 2014.
Okay. And when the breakup occurred, was there a big argument that occurred that precipitated the breakup?
We had a argument in late June. She went to South Florida for a couple of weeks, and when she came back, we tried to make things work, and it didn't really work. She sort of cut off contact.
All right. And during that argument when she went to South Florida, was she in South Florida on July 1st, 2014?
I believe she was. I dropped her off at her house on June 29th, I believe.
Okay. And during the course of your relationship with Ms. Adelson, did you ever meet her family?
I did.
Who did you meet?
I met her brother. We went to South Florida for alternative spring break, went to a Markel, and I had dinner with her brother. And I met her mother at her house just very briefly, maybe 10, 15 minutes at dinner. And when I would pick her up and the kids were there with the grandparents, I would have just a couple moments interaction with them. I didn't have a lot of contact.
Okay. And what about Catherine McBanois? Did you ever have an occasion to meet her?
Yeah, I went to dinner with her. I believe it was on March 11th when we went over there to meet Charlie.
Okay. So who was present at that meal on March 11th? And that's 2014?
That's correct. It was myself, Wendy Adelson, Charlie, and Katie.
Charles Adelson and
Catherine McBanois.
Thank you. What about Sigfredo Garcia? Did you ever have an occasion to meet him?
I did not. I've never met him.
Was Ms. Adelson very close to her parents and her brother Charlie?
Extremely close.
I want to ask you about June 4th, 2014. Do you recall an event that occurred that day that was unusual?
Yeah, I remember a couple of unusual occurrences on June 4th.
Could you tell us about that, please?
Yeah, I had met Ms. Adelson at the Red Eye Coffee Shop in Midtown for a coffee about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We were going to talk about our relationship a little bit. And she canceled a trip we had planned to California to visit my parents, which was scheduled for July 11th to 17th.
All right. And was she acting strangely that night?
Yeah, that night she was a nervous wreck to the point, I couldn't put my finger on why at the time, to the point where she lived kind of way up Centerville where there's no convenience stores or anything close, and I actually took about 35 minutes and drove to a convenience store to get her Pepto-Bismol because she was such a nervous wreck and had a real nervous stomach that evening.
Okay. And did she ever tell you what the problem was?
No, she's very nonspecific about it.
All right. Were you aware during the course of your relationship with Ms. Adelson about her efforts to relocate to South Florida with the children?
I certainly was.
All right. And were you in her life when she learned that the court was not going to permit her to take the children to South Florida?
No, our first date was September 27th, 2013. So that was a topic of conversation on our first couple of dates, but it was in the past when we discussed it.
All right. And was Ms. Adelson happy about the fact that she was not able to relocate?
No, she was quite bitter about it, actually. It was, as I said, a topic that came up, that tone came up on those first 2 dates.
All right. Did she make any statements to you in reference to her brother considering options to take care of this problem with her not being able to relocate?
Yes, she did.
Okay.
All right, Mr. LaCasse, when we broke, we were talking about statements made to you by Wendy Adelson about her brother considering options to take care of her relocation problem. What, if any, statements did she tell you to that effect?
Yes, ma'am. On July 13th, 2014, Wendy and I were speaking, and she asked me if she could share something with me confidentially. I told her sure. She mentioned, or she said, that Charlie had explored all options to take care of the problem, and that he had looked into having Professor Markel killed. It would cost about $15,000. I later talked to Investigator Isom and said that could have been $50,000. They sound an awful lot alike.
Okay, so you're not sure if she said 15 or 50.
That's right, but I'm confident she made that statement. I just can't remember the exact dollar amount. And she did state that was during the relocation battle the previous summer is when that had taken place.
All right. And the day that she made the statement to you was July 13th of 2014.
Yes, ma'am.
Did Mrs. Adelson tell you anything about the celebration dinner? Anything about a celebration dinner?
Yes.
Could you tell us about that, please?
Yes. A couple weeks after Professor Markel was murdered, we spoke on the phone, and she had mentioned that her and Charlie had gone to, these are her words, she said, Charlie and I went to what he described as a celebration dinner.
All right. And that was the dinner where she vomited?
That's right. That's correct.
And are you aware, Mr. LaCasse, that Ms. Adelson suggested you as a possible suspect in this homicide?
Yes, I am.
And where were you when Dan Markel was murdered?
I was on the road to Tennessee. I originally had a trip planned for 11 a.m. on Friday the 18th, and I had, at the last moment, changed my trip to Thursday night. So
you left early?
I left early without telling anyone, other than the people at the destination. Miss Adelson was the only person I had told in Tallahassee about the time that I was leaving, which was 11 a.m. on the 18th. I had informed her about that in around June 10th.
All right, so originally it was going to be July 18th at 11 a.m. would be your departure?
Yes, ma'am.
And would you be flying or driving?
I was driving.
All right, and it changed to Thursday night, so you left the night before and were in Tennessee at the time of the homicide?
That's correct.
No further questions.
Cross.
Still morning. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning.
Pronounce your last name for me again.
LaCasse.
LaCasse. Okay. Just want to make sure I got it right. Mr. LaCasse. So Wendy Adelson knew you were leaving, you had told her you were leaving Friday morning.
Friday morning at 11, we had discussed it because we had some plans that got canceled, so we had discussed it in some detail, actually.
And your plan was to leave Tallahassee and to drive northbound?
Thomasville Road, eastbound, yes, sir.
Sure. Let me rephrase that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So your plan was to travel north of Tallahassee to Tennessee, correct?
That's correct.
And you told Wendy that, hey, listen, I'm going on this trip and I'm leaving Friday morning around 11 a.m., correct?
That's correct.
And do you recall what time the actual shooting took place?
I believe it was right around 11 a.m.
The same exact time that you'd be leaving the area?
That's correct.
And although it was for a business trip, if people didn't know what your plans were, would you agree with me that it may look like you're leaving the scene if you're traveling outside of the jurisdiction?
That's what I was concerned about, that if I had taken my trip at the scheduled time, I would have looked like I was fleeing because I would have been driving, I would have taken Capitol Circle to Thomasville and been very close to Professor Markel's house, actually.
And when did you find out that Ms. Adelson, Wendy Adelson, had suggested that you may be involved in this?
I suspected it from the police interrogations, but they didn't explicitly say that. Eventually, I was able to view her interrogation video.
And by her, you mean Wendy Adelson?
Yes, sir.
And by interrogation video, you mean interview, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Because, as you're aware, she has not been charged in this case, correct?
I'm aware of that, yes, sir.
And obviously, you haven't either.
Right.
Right. You've been cleared by law enforcement?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, let's talk about your relationship with Wendy Adelson. You started dating her Give me a time period.
September 27th, 2013 was our first date.
And how long would you say that your relationship with her lasted?
Well, there was different phases of it. In that fall semester, we weren't exclusive. It was more casual. It became more serious late February, early March. So as far as a serious, I'm your boyfriend, you're my girlfriend sort of thing, just March through July.
Okay. So you started casually dating in September of 2013, and it got more serious at the beginning of 2014, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
And how did you meet Miss Adelson? How did you guys first have a date?
Yeah, through mutual friends.
Okay, so it wasn't like on a social media dating app or anything else?
No.
Okay. Were you aware if Miss Adelson was participating in online dating?
I think I knew that, well, I knew that she had dated online in the past. I did not know the time frame.
One of your concerns, okay, so once you guys became exclusive, and by exclusive I mean you called her your girlfriend and she called you her boyfriend, is that fair?
That's correct, and I was involved with the kids at that point and things like that.
And it got to the point where she introduced you to her family, right?
That's right.
And you indicated that there was a dinner where you met Charlie Adelson?
That's right.
Kind of a good-looking guy, right?
Sure.
Right. Works out?
Yes.
When you went on, when you had your double date, where it was you, Wendy Adelson, Charlie, and Miss Magmanowa, did you see what kind of car Mr. Adelson pulled in?
I don't recall seeing his car in the parking lot. We then went to his house, so I saw his garage and got a look at some of the vehicles he owned, but not that at dinner.
What kind of vehicles does he have?
Ferrari is the one that stood out to me.
Do you remember the color of the Ferrari?
I don't.
Did you make any comments to Wendy about the Ferrari?
Well, Wendy used to talk about Charlie having a Ferrari. I mean,
Oh.
that was, she would say, my brother's a character, he has a Ferrari, he has an undercover cop car, he has, I think, a nice Benz in addition or some luxury car.
So she knew what a Ferrari was, right?
Sure, well, sure.
So it's not like, she didn't say he's got a Porsche and you saw a Ferrari, right?
No, it was a Ferrari, and I actually remember discussing the cost of maintenance with Charlie. There were some downsides to having a Ferrari.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's tough. So pretty extensive car collection, right?
He had multiple cars, yeah. I don't know exactly how many.
And did you learn what he did for a living?
Yeah, I knew he was a periodontist from speaking with Wendy.
And was that the only night you had direct contact with Mr. Adelson, Charlie Adelson?
That's the only contact I ever had with him that night.
Did he appear to have, did he appear to be intelligent?
He had, that's a difficult question. I just met him the one night. That's a big
I'll
judgment.
withdraw that. Let me ask a more important question. Was he socialized? Was he drinking that night?
I don't recall if he was drinking. He was holding forth. He was talking a lot. He was confident. That was my impression of him.
He was talking a lot?
Yes.
Did you ever see him go to the bathroom?
I don't recall.
Did you ever see him, was he perspiring more than a normal person would during dinner?
This is 5 years ago. I don't remember. We were outside, and it was, not cool that time of year, but yeah.
Okay, so you're outside in like an open area restaurant?
Yeah, we were at the Yardbird on the patio.
Okay, the Yardbird in South Beach?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you witness Charlie Adelson doing cocaine that night?
I did not.
So this is a guy who's in South Beach, right? Drives a Ferrari, right?
Yes.
What had Wendy previously described him as having a lot of girlfriends?
Sure.
Handsome guy, probably could get attention of women.
I would presume so.
But your only face-to-face meeting was that dinner, correct?
Well, that dinner, and then we went back to his house and hung out in his hot tub for a little while, but that was it.
And during that time that you went to his house to hang up in the hot tub, did you see him ever go to the bathroom, or was he ever outside of your personal space?
Yeah, I think all of us were in and out of that hot tub at various points because we were sitting there a little while.
At any point did Charlie Adelson? Now, look, you're a law professor, correct?
Professor of social work, actually.
Correct. Okay. I'm sorry. You're a professor at the university, correct? I apologize, not law professor.
Yeah.
You're an educated person, correct?
Sure.
You'll agree with me that a lay person wouldn't solicit you to commit a murder, correct?
Objection. Argumentative.
Sustained.
I'll re-ask this. Did Charlie Adelson ask you to kill Dan Markel?
Did Charlie ask me to
Did he
kill him?
ask you?
No.
Of course not. And
Mr.
I apologize. I'll withdraw the of course not. And you'll agree with me that at no point did you give him any reason to believe that you would be someone that would do such a nefarious act, correct?
No.
Okay. When the prosecutor asked you about June 4th of 2014, you recall that?
Yes, sir.
And you said that you guys were at the Red Eye Coffee Shop, right?
That's correct.
And around what time was that?
I had a hair appointment at 2 or 3, so it was at 1 or 2.
And so in the early afternoon,
Could have been as early as 12:30, sir. I mean,
12:30.
Yeah.
Okay. So around 12:30 on June 4th, 2014, correct?
that's correct.
You indicated that she was and by she I mean Wendy Adelson, that she was acting unusual.
That's correct.
Would that be a fair assessment?
Yes.
Did you ask her what was wrong?
I did ask her what was wrong. It was very nonspecific. That happened with Wendy quite a bit with it, where she was upset and there was not an exact name put to why.
Was she upset often?
Yes.
Would she get these kind of physical reactions often, that her stomach would hurt or that she would ask you to get her medicine?
I got to know her better in the spring, so I saw more of it than I would have in the fall. That was the only time I can recall that was not an average thing. I think that's why I remember it, because it was unusual.
And you said that you drove about 35 minutes to get her medicine?
Yeah, it could have been 25, 35 minutes, but where she lived was not convenient to run to the store, so it was a discussion like, do we want to do that? It's all the way down there, and she was so nervous. I thought, no, I'm going. So
Did she go with you?
no, she did not. She had the kids that night, so she stayed with the children.
Did she make any kind of doctor's appointments shortly thereafter, to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge.
Now, you indicated that you guys became boyfriend and girlfriend at the beginning portion of 2014. Is that a correct statement, sir?
Yes, sir.
And when would you tell the members of this jury that your relationship with her ended?
Well, that's a little complicated. On July 14th, we went on a date. And when I got home, she had sent me an email saying, I need a week to think. Please don't contact me for the next week. And so that was the Monday before Professor Markel was killed. And then we didn't talk for maybe 10 or 12 days after the murder. So I assumed it was, internally, I assumed it was over, that night when you get an email like that, you're probably figuring it's over. But in subsequent phone calls, she acted as if it was still a slightly open issue. And we closed that down by phone calls that, obviously we're going to move on here.
Did you ever question her loyalty to you in your relationship with her?
With regularity, yes.
And when you say with regularity, when did you first become suspicious? Now, let me ask this question first. You were concerned that she was seeing other men, right?
I was.
Okay. And when did you first start getting this concern?
Probably March, April time frame, I started to wonder. So not too long after we became a couple, I guess what I was wondering is, have we really become a couple, or is she still doing what she was doing before? That was
So
kinda
was it like, did you find like text messages or direct messages on social media that made you kind of go, what's going on here?
No, I didn't see any text messages or anything on social media. Her behavior was just erratic. She would disappear. She would get home very late at night. So there were signs like that.
Would you talk to her about it?
I tried to.
Okay. So let me ask it this way.
Yeah.
Did she understand that you were concerned about her being loyal to you, or your relationship being a monogamous one?
To be completely honest, I think we kind of pussyfooted around that until we had that big fight at the end of June. That's what that argument was about.
Let's talk about that big fight.
Yeah,
Michelle.
sure.
Why don't you walk the members of the jury through what happened?
Yeah, I had taken Wendy to Gainesville with me. I was teaching in the off-campus program at UF for the weekend, so I took her with me.
I'm sorry, was it just you and her, or did she bring the kids?
No, it's just me and her.
So like a romantic getaway to Gainesville?
Well, work/pleasure. I teach during the day. She works in a coffee shop. We have dinner with friends at night, that kind of stuff. You know, It's a
Okay.
nice area down
Sounds
there.
nice.
Yeah, it was nice. Weekend started off fine. The Saturday night, we sort of got into it over this stuff. I confronted her about the fact that I suspected that she had been seeing other men.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So you're at dinner?
We were actually up in the hotel room. The night was basically over. It was pretty late. It was 9 or 10 o'clock at night when this discussion happened.
Okay. And had she had any alcoholic beverages at that point?
We both had, but I think just 1 or 2 glasses of wine a couple hours earlier.
Just socially with dinner, maybe?
Yeah, that was.
Okay.
There was no more drinking than that.
And was there? Did you say, listen, I think this, that, or the other? Did you have any specifics, or were you just giving a vague? I'm concerned about where this relationship is.
The latter. I was pretty specific. I told her I was very concerned. I was particularly concerned because the way she had framed our relationship was, you're not just becoming my boyfriend. I have children. I'm a mother. It's like I was auditioning for the job of husband and father is actually sort of how it felt in retrospect. So I bonded with the kids pretty tightly, and as you can imagine in a relationship, that kind of discussion gets more complicated when you're serious and there's kids. And she had been talking about me moving in. She had told me not to buy a house. She had told me not to buy a Jeep, that I needed to buy a vehicle that 2 car seats could fit in. So
So it sounds like you guys were heading down that path.
yeah, hence why I raised the issue, because I had some intuitions that everything wasn't quite right. Her behavior had been a little erratic, and I was worried about moving in and ending up in a really bad situation, actually.
So would it be fair to say that she was saying the wrong things, but her actions were speaking louder than her words?
That's not a bad summary. I was getting 2 very different messages based on behavior or what she was speaking to me, what she was saying. Yeah.
Did that argument or that discussion, did you feel it the next morning?
What do you mean by feel it, sir?
Was she acting any different the following morning?
Oh, the next day was probably the most awkward car ride I've ever had in my life. We rode from Gainesville to Tallahassee. She was crying. I was very upset. It was a very awkward 3-hour drive.
It's a 3-hour drive from
3 or 4, however long it is to.
Okay, from Gainesville to Tallahassee,
Yeah.
however long that was.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry.
And this was in June. You said June 20.
That would have been June 29th. That's the Sunday, the last Sunday in June.
2 weeks later, on July 13th, Wendy tells you, or Wendy has this discussion with you that the prosecutor elicited, right?
Yes.
From June 29th to July 13th, would you say your relationship with Wendy after that awkward, that long 2 or 3 hour, 4 hour, however long it is, from Gainesville to Tallahassee, emotional car ride, right?
Yes.
She's crying,
Yes.
upset,
Yes.
and I would assume, well, let me strike this. Did you believe that she was upset? Because like I said, she was saying all the right things, but she wasn't acting like she was talking.
It's very complicated, and she was all over the place, to be frank, in that at one point she was confessing, at one point she was saying, I never did that. She was saying she couldn't remember some things I wanted to talk about, which was frustrating. So, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No worries. You said she was confessing. Was she admitting to potential talking to other men?
More than talking the night before when we were having the argument, but it was,
What was she saying?
it was a heated discussion, so I don't remember every word of it. But at points, she kind of let it slip out that my concerns were well-founded.
Okay.
And then 5 minutes later, she would say the opposite. And when I've had to explain the story in the past, I've had to say it doesn't sound like it makes sense because she was just all over the place. She was hysterical, really.
Okay. So would it be fair to say at some point she admits to talking to other dudes, to talking to other men, and then shortly thereafter denies what she just confessed to?
Well, then that repeat as needed on the car ride back, she was like, I never did any of that stuff I don't know what you're talking about, which was kind of crazy making for me because she had confessed to some of it the night before.
Okay. So from June 29th till July 13th, would you say you were fixing the relationship at that point? Was it getting better or was it getting worse?
It's hard to tell because on the 29th I left her house and I didn't see her again until July 13th. She went to South Florida for those 2 weeks.
Did you guys talk on the phone?
We talked on the phone once in a while. We did some video chats. I talked to the kids via video chat and things like that. But it was very up in the air where the relationship was going to go. I would get a mixture of messages, verbally and by text.
Would you agree with me that your level of contact with her between June 29th and July 14th was less than it was before?
Oh, it was minimal. It was minimal. Days and days would go by at points without us talking on the phone at least. I may get the random text or something, but we weren't talking a lot.
And then on July 13th, Wendy, in essence, tells you that her brother, Charlie, had looked into hiring a hitman to kill Dan Markel.
In 2013, yes, sir.
In 2013.
Yes.
What was your reaction to this?
It was in the context of a relationship discussion. It kind of just blurted out when he has a habit of blurting things out that are kind of tangential or whatever. And so I didn't know what to make of it. My stomach kind of flipped. It was like a chilling statement. And then we kind of ended up talking about the relationship again, and so I didn't give it a lot of thought at the time. It was just like a crazy thing that someone would say, you know.
Okay. Very crazy thing.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this. Did you take that statement as a threat to you? And let me kind of clarify this. She indicated that because of her bad relationship with Mr. Markel, correct? And you'll agree with me that they had a bad relationship, correct?
That's how she characterized it.
You'll agree with me that she said, based on a bad relationship, that her brother had looked into hiring somebody to kill him, correct?
Well, that was specifically about the relocation, is
Okay.
what she said in that statement. I know they had bad blood otherwise for other reasons, certainly, but that was specifically tied to the relocation battle being lost. That was what prompted Charlie to look into it, according to her statement.
This conversation that you had on July 13th, where was it?
It was in her house on Aqua Ridge.
Was anybody else around when she made the statement?
No, sir.
Did you contact any of your friends after this conversation and discuss the fact that Wendy Adelson had indicated that her brother had looked to hire a hitman?
In what time frame?
Okay, so on July 13th, when the conversation's over, do you stay there that night?
No,
You left.
we ended with me telling Wendy, if this isn't going to work for you, you can text me and we can just break up. I don't want a big thing, like confrontation. And I left for the night. I did not stay.
Do you have like a family member or a best friend that you talk to about personal issues?
I have several, sure.
Okay. Did you call or contact any of them on the way back to discuss what had transpired about? And I'm not talking about the breakup.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm sorry. I am talking about the breakup.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you call your friends and go, hey, listen, it ended with me and Wendy?
It's summertime, and at FSU, a lot of these people were out of town. Some of them were even overseas, so there was less contact than there ordinarily would have been. But I'm sure I discussed the fact, well, not that night because it was so late. What I remember is the next day when I get this email saying, don't contact me for a week, I certainly shared that with friends because I found it really frustrating and surprising and thought it was weird.
Did you share with any of your friends the comment that Wendy Adelson made to you with regards to her brother and the murder for hire?
Yeah, I'm sure I did. I just couldn't tell you who or when I did that. But certainly, after the murder occurred, certainly I shared that with people. I also shared it with the police the first day they brought me in.
Right. So you were interviewed by law enforcement in this case, correct?
Yes, sir.
During your interview with law enforcement, did you mention this statement?
I did.
Okay. Did you tell it was Detective Isom that interviewed
It
you?
was him and Investigator Hale.
Okay. Did you indicate to them who you had shared this information with?
I don't know that I was asked to.
Hearsay.
Judge, it's not for the,
Overruled.
Can you restate the question?
no worries.
Yeah.
So when you tell them what Wendy told you about her brother's murder for hire plot, did you say, yeah, listen, I spoke to my buddy, because the murder happened on the 18th, correct?
That's correct.
And so 4 days prior to that is when you got that breakup, was it an email or a text message?
It was an email.
Okay, so you get a breakup email, and so you call your friends, which is normal, right?
Sure.
And you indicated just a few minutes ago that you probably mentioned the murder for hire to some of your friends, right?
At some point, I just don't know when.
Okay. What about, was that before or after your interview with law enforcement?
Was what before or after?
Your discussions with friends?
Well, after I had told it to the police, I certainly discussed it. I'm confident, I may have done it before as well, I don't recall that. But after I told the police that, I did share that with some people confidentially, yes.
Now, she told you, and by she I'm referring to Wendy Adelson, during your July 13th conversation, that he had looked and the price was either $15,000 or $50,000, correct?
That's correct.
So it's either one or the other, correct?
Right.
And would it be fair to say, based on your testimony, that she said that price was too high?
No, she didn't offer any further context or explanation. It was kind of a thing that was blurted out. And then literally 20 seconds later, she started talking about something else, and I can't recall what that was. I think it was the relationship stuff that I was very focused on.
So out of nowhere, she tells you, Charlie was going to go look to hire a hitman. It was going to cost $15,000 or $50,000, and you don't go back to that.
I don't know that it was out of nowhere. I believe preceding that was a discussion that if anything ever happened to Danny, she would move to Miami. I think I've spoken to the investigator. I asked him about that previously.
And listen, I have to ask Mr. LaCasse, at no point did you contact law enforcement after you heard of this threat so they could contact Mr. Markel to see if there's any need to protect him in any way, shape, or form?
I didn't.
Give me 1 second, Your Honor.
Good night.
Just a few more questions, sir.
Sure.
Would I be correct or incorrect in assuming or in saying that you were interested in having a monogamous relationship with Wendy Adelson?
I thought I had a monogamous relationship with
And you wanted to keep it, correct?
Depends when you're asking.
On July 13th, 2014?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That's right.
I'm sorry to ask such personal questions. I know it's difficult. Did you think it's unusual? Well, let me ask this. At some point, did you ever see a picture of Dan Markel?
Sure.
Do you think that there's a resemblance between yourself and him?
Everybody always says that. When I was dating her, no one ever brought it up. I see it from the pictures. In real life, I was never told that while we were dating.
And as you indicated before, you're also a professor?
Yes, correct.
Do you feel wronged by Wendy Adelson?
Do I feel wronged?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
No further questions.
Dr. Bannon.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So with that, good morning.
Good morning.
The questions I'm about to ask you are about the investigation into you, not that we believe you're a suspect, okay?
I understand.
You would agree with me at the beginning of the case in July 2014, there was a thought that you were a potential suspect.
That's what I've been told, yes.
You were contacted by the police.
I was.
You came in, you were interviewed.
Yes, I came straight from my trip into the TPD station.
3 separate times you were interviewed, right?
Yes.
Now, they didn't handcuff you at gunpoint and drag you into the station, right?
No, they asked me to come in, so I came in.
Voluntarily went in.
Yes.
You told them what you knew. You explained the information, right?
Yes.
Eventually, you helped them get bank records to show where you were. It was in Tennessee, right?
Yeah, I believe it was cell phone records and a receipt from a Kmart that had surveillance video of me, was my understanding of it.
So they get your bank records.
Yeah.
They see a transaction at a Walmart. right?
Yeah, credit card records, yes, sir. Yeah.
There's then a receipt.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go actually to the Walmart, get their surveillance footage that shows you there.
Yeah, it was a Kmart, but yes, sir.
And then you were cleared.
That's correct.
You would agree with me that they objectively investigated you.
Yes.
Now, had they not gotten the bank records, the Walmart video, or anything like that, one could paint a picture that you were involved. Just the fact that you left town right when the murder happened and you had this connection.
Well, except that I wasn't in the state at the time of the murder, so how could I have done it? So that's
What we're talking about here is that somebody could paint the picture
okay.
without all the evidence.
Yeah, if they don't have all the evidence, sure.
Let's go to something you said on direct talking about June 4th.
Yes.
And you appear to have a very good memory of all the instances. You said that Wendy had the kids on June 4th, the night of June 4th.
Yes.
You spent a lot of time with Wendy, spent a lot of time with the kids. You knew their daily schedule of the boys, right?
I knew not so much because I usually got there in the evening. So at the time, I would know what days she had the kids. But as far as pickup times and things like that, I usually saw them at the end of the day. I accompanied her just a couple times to pick up the kids. So I don't want to sound like I'm an expert in that because I'm not.
So June 4th, she has the kids. The next morning, June 5th, she would have taken them to Creative Preschool.
She would have, but I never stayed over there. So when the kids were there, so I wouldn't have known that because I left at the end of the night if the kids were there every time.
That would have been consistent with the custody setup that she had with Dan Markel, correct?
Yeah, depending on what the days on the schedule were, which I don't recall. I used to know that. I don't anymore.
It wouldn't have been that he'd come and pick them up at her house and then bring them over to Creative Preschool.
I never saw that kind of scheduling anyway.
So it would have been consistent with on June 5th, she would have dropped the kids off.
It would have been consistent if I don't have any primary knowledge of what she did on June 5th.
Let's talk about Charles Adelson. Understanding that you didn't have a close relationship with him, you did meet him and you hung out with him.
Yeah, for a few hours.
To you, and I'm going to use your words, he seemed like somebody that hung out on both sides of the tracks, right?
That's the way he presented himself in that hot tub. Yes.
And you took that to be accurate.
Yes, I took a self-presentation to be accurate. That's correct.
During the day, he's wearing a lab coat or scrubs, whatever dentists wear, right?
Right.
And then when he's off work, he's going out, he's hanging out at the gym with less savory people.
Yeah, that was sort of his characterization. I was sort of repeating what he said. Yeah.
In your words, less savory
Well, not
individuals.
less savory, gritty. I don't remember his exact words, but gritty, something like that. I don't remember his exact words, but yeah, that's how he presented himself in that hot tub. It seemed to be almost a braggadocio kind of thing, like, look at me, I'm on both sides. Yeah.
And you took him to be a street smart guy.
I did.
He had friends that were ex-special ops.
Yes, that's what he said. Yeah, that's what him and Wendy said. Yeah.
His gym friends that to you almost came off as nefarious.
Well, yeah, and I don't remember the details at this point, but he was talking about deals they were doing. There was a lot of hinting and innuendo. But yeah, you're accurately presenting how he presented to me.
Let's go now to the dinner on March 11, 2014.
Sure.
It was outside. It was on Miami Beach.
Yeah.
If you remember, and you may not, do you remember seeing a pickup truck with two gentlemen outside of the restaurant watching you guys?
No.
Let's go now to July 14th, 2014.
Okay.
Now, you had met Catherine McBanois several months prior to that.
Yeah, I met her in March.
So March, April, May, June, July. Wendy is opening up to you and saying what her brother had looked into doing, right?
I think you're talking about the 14th. You're talking about the 13th, I think.
July 13th?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So July 13, 2014, she's talking about her brother hiring a hitman. She's giving you incriminating details, right?
Yes.
Never said anything about the involvement of Catherine McBanois, right?
No, it was 3 sentences, so no, she didn't.
All right, let's talk about now the options that he looked into doing to take care of the problem, right?
Right.
On direct examination, the state attorney's office asked you what year it was. But there was more specifics to that. It was specifically the summer of 2013, right?
Yes, it was attached to the relocation, so whenever, it was after relocation had failed, where she'd been denied the motion for relocation.
But I want to make sure it's clear because we didn't have the full information from
Yeah.
direct examination. What Wendy told you is that her brother looked into hiring a hitman in the summer of 2013.
That's correct.
And that would have been before he even knew Catherine McBanwa.
Yeah, I don't know when they met, but if you say so.
One brief moment, Your Honor. No further questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Redirect.
Mr. LaCasse.
Yes, Your Honor. The breakup email on July 14th, 2014, I know you had some phone contact after that, but was that basically the end of your relationship?
That's the last time I ever saw her.
Okay.
We did have some, it was in August. It was after, we didn't talk between then and after the murder.
Okay,
Until
and you
after
never got back together and resumed your
Oh,
relationship?
no.
No further questions?
All right, did you ever have a question of this witness? Write your question down, we'll go sidebar. So, series of questions from the jury. The email, the July 14, 2014 email, was that on a FSU website or a private website? Do you have any recollection?
I think that was from Wendy's Gmail account.
Okay, what about to you?
Oh, that would have been to my Gmail as well.
Okay. So the answer is no, it was not on an FSU website?
Correct.
Okay.
To the best of my recollection, Your Honor.
Okay. Did Ms. Adelson indicate that she wanted to relocate to have the children full-time?
She talked about, she didn't talk directly about relocating because she knew that was no longer a possibility. But the other side of that coin, how unhappy she was in Tallahassee and how frustrated she was by the child custody, were issues that came up, if not every day, every week, that came up very frequently.
Okay, so that was actually the next question about, she frequently spoke about the divorce and the custody battle.
Yes, consistently throughout the entire relationship.
And did she appear distressed when she didn't have the children with her?
Sometimes, yes.
What kind of vehicle were you driving back in July 2014?
I was driving a 2004 four-door silver Nissan Sentra.
Ms. Kaplan?
No further questions?
Garcia? McBanwa?
Nothing, Your Honor. Thank
All
you.
right, you can step down. Do we need to keep this witness any further?
Judge, I'd like to release him to go about his business, but I'd like him to remain under the rule.
All right, you can remain under the rule of sequestration, so don't discuss the case with anyone, but you're free to go about your business. You have a phone number for him if you should
Yes,
need it.
sir.
All right, thank you. You may step down. Call your next witness.
Stephen Lutes.
Come up here, please, sir. If you'd face the clerk and be sworn, please, sir.
Swear to affirm testimony about giving this case the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do.
Have a seat. Slide up the microphone, please, sir.
Okay. Hi.
What is your name, sir?
My name is Stephen Lutes.
Will you spell that, please?
Sure. Last name is Lutes. First name, common spelling is Stephen.
With the V or the PH?
The common spelling, the PH.
All right. And where are you employed, Mr. Lutes?
I work for J.P. Morgan Chase Bank in Tampa, Florida.
All right. And what is your job title?
A regional security specialist.
All right. Are you familiar with a security video camera at the J.P. Morgan Bank or at JP Morgan banks in general back in July of 2014.
Yes.
And did you review some specific surveillance footage from a specific ATM surveillance camera from July of 2014 in reference to this case?
I did. Two separate cameras that associated with that ATM machine.
Okay. And can you tell me a little bit about how the process works which gave rise to the images that you reviewed?
You mean as far as how they were transferred to?
How are the images captured initially? Is it a camera that runs constantly?
It is. 24 hours, 7 days a week. They're always running.
And is the camera mounted on the ATM machine?
The two cameras I referenced, there's one that's typically inside the ATM, which is called a transaction camera, which will give you facial pictures of the person conducting a transaction on the machine. And then in this instance, it was a drive-up ATM, so there's also an overhead camera that would capture more geared toward the vehicle that the person was driving through in.
All right. And do the cameras, or this, I want to specifically ask you about the camera that's mounted inside the ATM machine on the video that is shown, was previously reviewed by you on State's Exhibit 143. How does that camera record? Where's the information stored that it records?
So that camera it's exterior to the branch. It's at a branch location, like everybody would be familiar with. It's connected to a DVR that's stored inside the branch, inside what's called a technology room. It's a locked room that's alarmed. So it's stored on that DVR and then connected from the DVR to a wider area network system.
All right, I'm going to approach and show you what I've marked as States 143. Do you recognize States 143?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize it?
I reviewed this earlier, before I arrived from a testimony here.
All right, and is States 43 a fair and accurate copy?
43 or 143?
143. A fair and accurate copy of the video surveillance footage captured by that ATM machine that we were referencing earlier.
Yes, it is.
And was the footage captured on State's Exhibit 143 from July 18th, 2014?
Yes, it was.
Right. And was the camera that captured these images in proper working order back in July of 2014?
Yes.
And does it accurately show the areas in front of the ATM machine as you previously described?
Yes, it does.
All right. And where was that ATM machine, this particular one, located?
It's in Pembroke Pines, Florida.
And do you recall the time of the images that were captured on there?
It was in the evening. I believe it was around 18:45 or 6:45 in the evening.
Okay. Any indication that the footage that has been prepared for presentation to the jury on State's Exhibit 143 has been tampered with or altered in any way?
No, there's not.
Okay, at this time I'd ask to introduce States 143.
Any objection?
Nothing from Mr. Garcia, Judge.
McBanum? No objection. All right, it'll be admitted.
At this time, Mr. Lutes, I'm going to show you what I've marked as States Exhibits 38 through 44.
Okay.
Take a moment to look through each of those and let me know if you recognize them.
I do, yes.
States Exhibits 38 through 44 fairly and accurately capture still images taken from the video in States Exhibit 143.
Yes, ma'am.
Judge, at this time, I'd ask to move into evidence States 38 through 44.
Any objection?
Judge, if I could just quickly re-review these exhibits. No objection from Mr. Garcia, Judge.
McBanum?
No objection.
38 through 44 will be admitted.
Permission to publish States 143.
You may.
questions?
Cross.
Good afternoon, late morning, Mr. Lutes, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. So, State's Exhibit 143 is video surveillance at the Pembroke Mines. May I?
Yes.
At the J.P. Morgan Chase location at, on Cobblestone Plaza, correct?
Yes, correct.
And that's 14916 Pines Boulevard?
I don't have that address memorized, but yes, I believe that's correct, yes.
Well, the items that the government showed you, Judge, may I approach?
You may.
To refresh your recollection, if you want to take a look at the items that have already been entered into evidence. And let me know when your recollection is refreshed.
It is refreshed.
May I re-approach, Your Honor?
You gonna be asking about these pictures?
Yes, sir.
Why don't you let him hold on to them? Come on.
Those are still photographs taken from the video that's
That-
Government's Exhibit 143, is that correct, sir?
Yes, it is.
And you'll agree with me that that shows a silver Prius driving up to an ATM?
Yes, that appears to be correct.
And tell me again what your role is with J.P. Morgan Bank?
I manage physical security for the regional, I'm the regional specialist for physical security, the bank in Florida.
And when you were doing your due diligence in this matter, because I assume you did, correct?
Yes.
You were given a subpoena by the government?
Our firm was served a subpoena. I personally was not.
I apologize. The company that you work for was served with a subpoena, and then they came to you and they said, Mr. Lutes, we need you to do your due diligence and comply with the subpoena, correct?
That's generally how it happens. Not in this particular instance. We've got a subpoena compliance unit. They would provide the video and still photos. I personally didn't provide those, but I'm familiar with the system. I work with this system on a daily basis.
Were you able to do any research into what this specific transaction entailed?
No.
But you'll agree with me that it appears on the video that the driver is conducting a bank transaction. Is that correct?
It does appear so, yes.
And does it appear as if he is retrieving money or depositing money?
Based on the photos that I'm looking at, I can't say one way or the other. Based just on these photos.
What about on the video? You indicated on direct examination that you were able to authenticate the video, correct?
Correct, yes.
And that's, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead and finish.
No,
And that's
correct.
because the prosecution gave you the CD, you looked at it, and you put your initials on it, right?
That's correct.
And that would indicate that you reviewed the video?
Yes.
Okay. And on the video, is the person driving the car, is he making a deposit, or is he making a withdrawal?
It's different. It's difficult to say. Because the way the camera is positioned, it's geared more for getting facial identification of a customer. So really, you just see the person's arm reach to the vicinity of the machine. So it's difficult to say what, you can always tell what kind of transaction it was, just based from the video or the pictures.
Would it be safe to say that your company, and you work for J.P. Morgan, correct?
Yes.
Your company would be able to provide that information if requested?
Yes, they would.
Did you do an internal investigation to make a determination as to what specifically the video showed?
No, I didn't.
And to clarify that, that's because you're indicating here that you can't tell whether the driver of that vehicle is making a deposit at the ATM, correct?
Correct.
Or if he's making a withdrawal, correct?
Correct. For my purposes here, it doesn't really matter to me one way or the other.
I understand that, but I'm asking questions with regards to this investigation, so I don't mean to be
No.
prod. So you won't have the answer as to what exact action the driver of that Prius was conducting at your bank location?
Correct.
Simply that he was at that location. Correct?
He was at that location, and it appears that he's conducting a transaction, that's all.
There'd be no other reason to go to a bank teller other than to conduct bank business, is that correct?
That's a fair statement, I think.
Other than these videos, are there external videos around the bank that could show the parking lot area or areas surrounding the bank?
Not always, no.
Okay. With regards to this specific location, the location that's addressed in the top right-hand corner of the exhibits, if I may, Judge, so I can publish.
Yes, sir.
Sorry. Let's do this.
Not our day for technology, apparently.
Let me do this. May I do this, Judge?
Well, let's see if he can get the projector working.
If you may. I think it's showing on the little screen.
Yeah. Yes, but it's not gonna show up here?
Give it a second, sure.
Leave it alone for a minute, is what he's saying. Okay. It's warming up. Okay, patience, that's.
Okay. Here we go. State's Exhibit 43. You see that, sir?
I do.
And that appears to be an aerial view of a vehicle at a Chase ATM, correct?
Correct.
And that Chase ATM location is 14916 Pines Boulevard in Pembroke Pines, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
To your knowledge, as an employee of J.P. Morgan Bank, are there additional cameras other than these specific ones that focus just on this drive-through ATM that would show like the parking lot and a complete overview of that bank itself?
There's a camera system at each bank. Based upon the physical layout of the bank, some of them do have the exterior cameras to cover parking lots and that kind of thing, and some of them don't. And it's something that's in the process continually also to add those to various locations.
What's your title at J.P. Morgan Bank, sir?
Regional Security Specialist.
Okay, and you'll agree with me as a regional security specialist, you would have information as to whether or not they have security surveillance that includes what I asked at this specific location?
Yes.
Do they have those cameras at this specific location?
I can't say one way or the other. I'm not sure.
Did the government request in a subpoena all the security cameras or just what's at the drive-through ATM?
I don't know.
What did you provide them?
I didn't provide this information. The subpoena compliance unit did.
I apologize. To your knowledge, did the compliance unit provide any other security cameras or security footage other than the drive-through ATM?
I haven't seen any other footage.
The government didn't show you, you know how on that disc that they showed on Government's Exhibit 143 that has your signature, there was no other security cameras that you signed to that you reviewed, correct?
That's correct.
Let's see what time this starts at. Government's Exhibit 38 appears to be the first in time at 6:45, 56 seconds. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, sir.
And then there's a few others going up to Government's Exhibit 44, which is at 6:47 and 5 seconds, correct?
Yes.
So for a minute and 10 seconds, this car was at that drive-through window, correct?
Or thereabout, I think, yes.
Can you tell, or do you have any information to tell this jury about where this... I apologize. Do you have any information, any tangible information, any physical evidence that can educate this jury as to where this car was a second before 5:40, 6:45 and 56 seconds?
Not based on what I've reviewed, no.
Or what about after 6:47 and 5 seconds?
I would give the same answer, correct.
Just 1 second, Judge.
Matt?
Thank you, sir. I have no further questions at this time. Thank you.
McBannel?
No questions, Your Honor.
Redirect.
No, sir.
Sure, I have a question. Apparently, you'll see the video later when we get the technology working. Anybody have a question? All right, you can step down. Do we need to keep this witness any further?
No, Your Honor.
All right, either, anybody need it?
I
No,
apologize, Judge. I was going to open it like
you need this witness further?
Thank you, Judge.
No, Your Honor.
All right, you're excused. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You got a relatively brief witness, Ms. Kaplan.
Judge, at this time, I'd like to take another stab at the publication. State's Exhibit
Okay,
143.
all right.
Somebody can assist us with that? Mm-hmm. Judge, the next witness will require a few moments to set up the courtroom.
All right, why don't we go ahead and take a lunch break? We've 11:45. Let's plan to start back at 1 o'clock. By that clock, so I'll give you an hour and 15 minutes. We'll let you step out. Have a good lunch. Either side need anything?
No, Your Honor.
All right, 1 o'clock.